Okay, hi everyone. Starting again, chapter 19, Betrayed. It was 11 in the morning on a Tuesday. School had started a couple of weeks before, and Doug was expected home that Friday. The necessity for his traveling almost over. Archer had called Jody, distraught. She'd struggled for 3 weeks from the guilt she'd felt over Audra, feeling helpless and depressed, but keeping her daughter's secret like she'd been asked. Jody couldn't turn to Doug with her feelings of inadequacies and was ashamed to let Tony know any more of what a poor mother she felt she was. She'd fought with the anxiety attacks and the fear that had accompanied them. When Archer had called her, he lifted her spirits to feel needed by someone. They were sitting across from each other at the cafe-style table in the kitchen of his expensive but scarcely furnished apartment. She listened attentively to him discuss his ex-wife's upcoming marriage. "Jody, I shouldn't be bothering you with this. I'm sorry." "Archer, don't be silly. You're not bothering me. You can talk to me about anything. You've been here for me the entire summer. You know you can call me whenever you want. I'm just sorry Doug isn't here for you to talk to." "No, I'd rather talk to you. I need a woman's advice." "Well, you're one of my dearest friends and you can talk to me. I know, and I appreciate it. I just didn't think it would affect me like this. I mean, we've been divorced for over a year, and I knew it would happen eventually. After all, she's a beautiful woman." Jody reached across the table and took hold of his hand. He squeezed hers affectionately. "I don't know if we ever really get over a true love, Archer, no matter how long you've been divorced." "That's the whole thing, Jody. I don't know if I ever truly loved her, but for some reason the news of her getting married sure hit me hard. God, I feel like such an idiot." "No, you're not an idiot. Don't ever say that. You're one of the sweetest people I've ever known." With her other hand she tried to take the glass of scotch out of his reach he'd been drinking for over an hour. He watched her remove the glass but ignored it. Instead he took hold of the bottle and tipped it up to his lips. "You know, it's not so much the fact that she's getting remarried so soon after the divorce, but who she's marrying. Chad Nelson of all people. I thought he was my friend. Now I'm wondering if they had been seeing each other before we ever split. And you know, she's still wanting alimony from me." This last piece of information was said between clenched teeth. He took another swig of scotch. A small amount dribbled down his chin. He wiped it with the back of his hand while still holding the bottle by the neck like it was his ex-wife's throat. "Don't think that way. It will only drive you crazy." His words were becoming more indistinguishable with every tip of the bottle. Knowing she needed to get him to slow down, she asked, "Archer, maybe you should slow down a little on the scotch. It's only 11 in the morning. How much of that have you had anyway?" "I don't know, a little. And the crazy thing is," he continued as if the conversation had not been interrupted, "I don't even want her back, so I don't know why I'm letting this bother me." He squeezed her hand a little harder. "God, I'm glad you're here, Jody. There's nowhere else I want to be, Archer. And for what it's worth, I think it bothers you because you're a compassionate and caring man. She was out of her mind to leave you like she did." Archer looked up and into her eyes, the warmth of his feelings swimming clear even as the scotch clouded his focus. Even through the haze of his drunken stupor, his desire for her was as strong as ever. He got up quickly and walked into the living room to keep her from seeing the lust he was feeling. She followed him and found him standing with his back to the room, staring out the plate glass window at the skyline of downtown Minneapolis. She stood quietly and watched as he bowed his head. She thought she heard a hiccup and wondered if he was crying. She stepped up to see him and touched him softly on the shoulder. "Archer, what can I do to help you?" He sat the bottle on the windowsill and slowly turned to face her. He looked so sad she reached up and hugged him. Like a child who'd lost his best friend, he put his arms around her waist and buried his face in her hair. They stood that way, and she just let him lean on her. Another hiccup escaped his throat from a pent-up tear. "You don't have to be brave in front of me." She reached up and cradled the back of his head. He breathed in deeply and smelled her hair. The oxygen, along with the deep bend of his neck on her shoulder, had an adverse reaction with the alcohol in his bloodstream. He got a little dizzy and clung to her for support. They stood holding each other for a few minutes as she tried to comfort him. Fueled by scotch, he soon overturned his inhibitions. He lifted his head and met her eyes. Their lips were inches apart. He could feel her breath as she sighed, and her breast pressed against his chest with each intake of air. I'm not being brave for you, Jody. I'm trying to be brave because of you. With a tilt of her head, she looked at him confoundedly. I don't understand. Jody, you have to know how I feel about you. The words were slurred, making his inebriation more obvious. Sorry. She stood looking at him, confusion muddling her face. She tried to step back to put some distance between them, but with a move that was almost imperceptible, he tightened his arms around her. She tried again to gently push him away. He looked down at her, into her eyes, those lovely eyes with their gold specks encased in green. His eyes roamed over her face, her forehead, her cheeks, her hair, her lips. Without coherent thought, he leaned forward and kissed her. A spark went through his system that no drink he had ever had could duplicate. Jody froze in place as his lips moved on hers, her open eyes staring at his closed ones. She stiffened when he took the kiss deeper, and his arms tightened around her waist. When she didn't back away, Archer took it as a sign of consent. His hand started moving from her waist up her back, and he gripped her shoulders, his desire racing his common sense along a bloodstream of alcohol. His kissing got more aggressive, and instinct had her straightening her back even more, and leaning slightly backward, started pushing at his shoulders to get him to let her go. She wrestled her lips out from under his and tried to speak as he aggressively nibbled at her neck. Archer! She forced his name through a throat that bent at a backward angle. She tried to get enough space between them to push harder. He moved his lips back to hers and started pushing her down to the carpet. Speaking through the kisses, he confessed, Jody, you have no idea how long I've wanted this. She could smell the liquor on his breath. Fear was causing goosebumps to shimmy up her skin. Archer, please. She moved her head to the side, but he mistook her pleading for desire and forced her knees to bend until she was on her back on his plush beige carpet, his body heavy on top of hers. Jody, I want you. I've wanted you forever. He started groping at her clothes and got his hand under her shirt. He squeezed her breast, his head swimming in alcohol-fueled eagerness. Archer, stop. She tried to wiggle out from under him when she felt the buttons on her blouse pop open. Tears started forming behind her eyes, but he couldn't see them for having his head buried in her neck. He never heard a word she said for being so overcome by drunken lust. I love you. I've always loved you. Oh, Jody, I've got to have you. The words were muffled, but she heard them nonetheless, disbelief making her draw in deep breaths of air. Amongst the groping and squirming, he was able to get his hands under her skirt and pulled at her panties. She felt them rip. Her tears clogged her throat as he fondled her. Within a matter of seconds, he had them both naked from the waist down. He pinned her wrists to the floor and used his knees to push her legs apart and entered her roughly. She swung her head from side to side frantically, trying to understand what was happening. As the inevitable settled in, she resigned herself to the attack. She turned her head to the left and let the tears run down her temple. She stared at the far wall, at the plaques he'd won from playing hockey. Her mind detached itself from reality. Everything was surreal, in slow motion, as she felt herself floating outside her body and calmly studied the pictures on the wall. She lay still, crying as he violated her body. With thrusts that were brutally painful, her sense of preservation finally had her swallowing the lump in her throat. She heard herself scream. Noise. He could hear something but wasn't sure what it was. It was a panic sound, loud, like someone was in pain. Screaming. Someone was screaming. His face scrunched in confused comprehension as his senses started working independently of the alcohol. Blinking his eyes in focused concentration, his mouth stopped ravaging her neck as he looked up. As quickly as he had started, he stopped. Sluggishly, he raised up and looked down at her. Someone could have doused him in ice-cold water. His shock was so great. He watched her head move from side to side in panic. Her screaming had him instantly sobering. She kept screaming, unable to stop the hysteria. She started bucking under him. Jody, Jody, oh God, Jody, I'm so sorry. Her hysteria had blocked her ears. Jody, honey, I'm so sorry. Listen, Jody, calm down. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I never meant to hurt you. As the reality of what he'd done hit his hazy system, he sat back and with a disbelieving stare looked at his own hands, shame making them unrecognizable. He realized he still had her pinned down with his knees and jumped back like he'd been hit by lightning, landing on his bare butt between her legs. Crab crawling hastily backward, he tried to put distance between them as fast as he could. He scurried backward until his back hit the wall, his knees pulled tight to his chest, his pants at his ankles, his legs bare. Jody had felt his weight come off her and calmed down enough to stop the noise in her head. She lay for a moment, continuing to cry. She sat up rigidly and braced her weight on her hands. She stared at the shock on his face. Languidly, as if she were doing no more than politely leaving a tea party, she stood up, pulled her skirt down, picked up her ripped panties, grabbed her purse, and headed for the door. I have to be going now, she said with eerie calmness. Archer stared at her retreating back, unable to move from his position on the floor. Jody, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. Please forgive me. I have to go now, she repeated as she continued to head for the door, never looking over her shoulder or turning around. Jody. It was a whisper. Jody. She closed the door behind her very gently. Archer heard the click of finality when she shut the door, like a bang from a gun. For several minutes he sat and stared at it. Then he fell to his side and curled into a ball. God, oh God, what have I done? Jody, Jody, I'm so sorry, so sorry. His apology was spoken to an empty room and was repeated like a mantra over and over and over. He stayed on the floor of his apartment until the sun set that evening and begged for forgiveness to an empty room and a woman who couldn't hear him. He laid there until exhaustion overtook him and he fell into a deep, alcohol-induced sleep. Jody drove home on automatic pilot. She could feel the soreness between her legs but didn't concentrate on it. When she entered her house, she went directly to the bathroom, ran a tub of very hot water, pulled off her clothes, and slowly climbed in. Bruises were beginning to form between her legs, and she saw droplets of blood run into the water. She bathed herself as if this sort of thing happened every day. No tears, no hysterics, no contemplating what had happened. Her mind ran in circles. Doug must never know. Doug doesn't like it when I'm emotional. No emotion, no emotion, she said over and over in her head. Archer, oh God, why? She began questioning her own role in the attack. I must have let him on. It's my fault. I let him kiss me. I shouldn't have let him on. Doug can never know. Don't cry, don't cry. I must never cry. When she was finished bathing and calmed down enough to think, she got out of the tub, toweled off, put on fresh clothes, then dried the tub with her used towel to wipe away any evidence. She gathered up her dirty clothes and towel and walked to the garage. As she passed the laundry room, she dropped the towel into the washing machine and turned it on. She held the clothes in her left hand as she entered the garage and went to her garden tools. She picked up the trowel, as if she were doing no more than gathering up seeds to be planted, went through the kitchen and into her backyard. Under the big tree in the corner of the yard, where the ferns curled their leaves in an array of harmony, she dug a hole and buried her dirty clothes. Doug will be home on Friday. I'll have to tell him I'm on my period so he won't want to have sex. Yes, that's it. Everything's fine. He mustn't know. He can never know, she reminded herself. Her thoughts were calm and rational, but her movements were jerky, and she was unsteady on her feet. When she was finished burying the reminders of her pain, she lay down amongst her flowers, letting the ferns and Gerber daisies hide her naked shame. Her eyes roamed as her head lay in the dirt, and she tentatively reached up and one by one pulled the petals of the daisies from their stems. As she watched them flutter to the ground around her, she saw it, laying there, amid the orange confetti, was Dougie Jay's little fairy doll. Her mind went blank as she picked up the doll. With one hand she held the doll, and with the other continued to pull off petals. A wind came up, and she watched the petals being lifted into a tiny swirl of dust and wind as they floated away on the breeze. The sky clouded over, and a slow drizzle began to fall. She laid there, not feeling the cold drops on her skin. She was protected. She could not be touched, her fractured mind believed. She was protected by the flowers, the ferns, and the little fairy. On to Nora. Jody, you look terrible. When's the last time you washed your hair? Nora interrogated her sister like a drill sergeant. I don't know. Are you sick? No. Her answers were spoken in a monotone as she picked at the cuticles on her nails. Well, if you're not sick, then what's wrong? Nothing. Jody, you're anything but fine. Besides, I can't imagine you looking like this, and Doug hasn't noticed. Nora's concern for her sister was apparent from her tone, but there was also an underlying impatience with Jody's lack of commitment to the conversation. She never had the patience nor the inclination to try and drag out a problem, especially when it concerned her older sister. Doug just got home last Friday, and I've not been feeling well, so I was in bed most of the weekend. What's wrong? Flu or something? You look like you've lost a few pounds, and you don't need to get any skinnier. It makes your face look pinched and old. You know Bridget will be here soon, and we only have the afternoon to go shopping. Are you going to fill up to going? I don't know. I don't really feel like going out. Jody was pacing from one end of the room to the other like a wild animal. When she saw her sister's face at her second turn, she walked past her down the hall and into her bedroom. When she was finished bathing, Following Jody down the hall, Nora continued to question her. Oh, for Pete's sake, Jody, what is it? You really do look terrible. Nora waited no more than 10 seconds for an answer before her exasperation got the better of her. Either tell me now or I'm going to get really angry. Okay, I'm sorry. Jody apologized without turning around. Don't be angry. When she entered her bedroom, she continued her pacing. Jody, you're really beginning to concern me or frustrate me. I don't know which. And stop picking at your cuticles. You're making them bleed. I'm sorry, she said again. She then folded her hands over her chest so her nails would be hidden under her armpits and out of her sight. She looked at Nora and said haltingly, I guess I could use some advice, but please don't tell Doug. I'm so ashamed. After another moment of stalling, she finally relented. Nora, I don't really know how to say this, but I think I was raped. Jody dropped her eyes to the carpet, embarrassed by her confession. What? Jody's voice took on an edge that startled Jody. By who? No, wait. I want you to sit down and tell me exactly what happened. Jody sat down gingerly on the edge of the bed, obeying whatever she was told to do, grateful she didn't have to make decisions for herself. I think I was raped. I think Archer raped me. Her words were just above a whisper, as if she had swallowed a ball of air that was blocking her voice from surfacing. What? Archer? Are you kidding? And what do you mean you think he raped you? After another moment to swallow her shame along with the air, Jody proceeded to tell her sister everything that had happened a week ago in Archer's apartment. She only hoped Nora would understand. It was the longest 10 minutes of Jody's life. Then I just walked out and didn't look back. Okay, I'm going to ask you something, Jody, and I want you to think hard. Did he finish? Finish? What do you mean? Did he finish? Did he have an orgasm? Jody's mind was slightly blank, confused by the question. Why are you asking that? Because if he didn't finish, then it wasn't rape. Jody looked at her sister, her mind spinning from the memory. But I told him to stop, Nora, and he didn't. It hurt, and he wouldn't stop. He entered me and left me bruised and bleeding. It doesn't matter, Jody. If he didn't finish, it wasn't rape. Oh, I'm sure he might have gotten a little rough or something, but it doesn't sound like he raped you. Do you remember if he finished? I don't remember, but I don't think he did. He just kind of stopped. I think I was screaming. I don't know. Everything is such a blur. And like I said, I just got up, picked up my clothes, and left. Well, did he say anything or do anything to stop you? No, not to stop me, but he said he loved me. I just... Jody was interrupted from finishing her sentence when Bridget walked into the room. She had walked into the house without knocking and had followed the noises to the master bedroom. She had stopped to check her appearance in the Art Deco mirror that hung at the end of the hall before entering the bedroom. What's this I heard? Who said he loves you? She wanted to know. Nora and Jody responded at once. No one, Jody said quickly. Archer, Nora answered, both in unison. Bridget only heard Nora. She turned to Jody with an act of swift jealousy. Archer, are you kidding me? Archer said he loves you. It's not what you think, Bridget, Nora began to explain. Nora, Jody pleaded. Let's just drop it, okay? The look in Jody's eyes stopped Nora from relating the entire story to Bridget. Drop what? Bridget asked again, more forcefully. Nothing, Nora said reluctantly. It was just something Archer said to Jody. That he loves her? Bridget crossed her arms as if an explanation was her due. Finally, she turned to Jody and said condescendingly, Jody, please, you can't really be thinking Archer's in love with you. You obviously misconstrued his meaning. If Archer said he loves you, it's because he loves you like a sister. He's only Doug's best friend after all, and you've known him forever. Sometimes you can be so gullible. I swear, is the sky purple in your world? She ended her string of questions with a chuckle and a roll of her eyes. Jody sat mute, hurt by Bridget's patronizing attitude. Besides, she continued, as she gave her makeup one last check in the bureau mirror, you're not his type. Dismissing the entire conversation as irrelevant, she asked with apparent impatience, Now, are we ready to go? Yeah, Nora said, heading for the bedroom door. Let's just drop it. You know, I'm still not feeling well, Jody said quietly. I think I'll stay home and get some rest. What? Do you mean I came all the way out here and you're not even going? Bridget, I think Jody needs to rest. Let's just give her the day and she'll be back to her old self in no time. Finally noticing her sister's appearance, Bridget gave in. Fine, she replied. I'd try and talk you into going, but I'm not in the mood to put up with your depressing mood anyway. As Bridget headed out the door in front of Nora, Nora turned back to Jody. I'll call you later, okay? The best thing for you to do is just forget about it. It's not important enough to think about, so pull yourself together. I won't say anything to anyone, but for Pete's sake, take a shower before Doug gets home. Jody watched her sisters leave. With no one to tell her what to do, she did the only thing she could think to do, obey her sister. She slowly walked to the bathroom, intending to do what she'd been told and shower. She had to pull herself together before Doug got home from work. He'd been patient with her so far about not having sex, but she knew it wouldn't last. She stood and stared at her reflection in the large mirror over the bathroom vanity. Her mind wandered as she stared at someone she didn't seem to recognize. A woman with her hair and her eyes, but the face seemed unfamiliar. Her mind was so mixed up she felt like a storm was brewing in her head, the clouds blocking coherent thought with only the sharp shards of obedient dictates that had been pummeled into her by her parents since she was a girl. A wife does not complain. She doesn't whine. She obeys her husband. She does not bother him with petty problems. They had pounded commands into her psyche the moment she'd started sprouting breasts. They were so ingrained into her by the time she'd married Doug, she didn't know where her thoughts started and theirs ended. It was one of the things Doug had liked about her compliant nature. She knew all of this, but she still stood and stared at herself. Her survivor's instinct begged for an outlet from the unpleasantness that didn't make sense. She thought of what Bridget had said, a purple sky. It made her smile for the first time in days. Her mind seemed to become a jumble of rumination from her conversation with both her sisters as she watched the glazed eyes of the stranger in the mirror. A purple sky. Must pull myself together. He didn't finish. It wasn't rape. Maybe the sky would rain purple drops. Not rape, not rape, not rape. Mustn't remember, mustn't complain, mustn't tell. How beautiful a purple sky would be. It's not important. I'm not important. Maybe somewhere on the other side of the sky, the world is purple too. She smiled at her image and went into her backyard and sat amongst her flowers. End of that chapter. I'll see you later. Bye.